Safety of the people still inside Mosul.
We're afraid that the civilians who are trapped inside of Mosul are at extreme risk. They're at extreme risk from crossfire, from barrage. There are reports that ISIL has contaminated large parts of the city with booby traps. We're afraid that people could be expelled forcibly by ISIL, or they could be held as human shields. Any way you look at it, the civilians who are there right now are at extreme risk.
And there are these troubling reports, you just mentioned that, of ISIS using civilians as human shields. And are children and the elderly the most vulnerable here?
There's no question that the people who would be held as human shields by ISIL, their lives would be in danger. We saw something very similar in Fallujah when the Iraqi security forces were liberating that city. What you saw was ISIL trying to hold people back. And again, just as you said, it's the women, it's elderly, it's the children. They are the ones that are at the most risk in situations like this. This is what we're very worried may happen in Mosul.
The assault is underway, and the fear is that it will further add to the scale of the already enormous refugee crisis. What's your understanding of how many more Iraqis could be forced to flee?
What we're afraid of is that in a worst-case scenario, up to 1 million people may flee the city. We don't know if that will happen, and obviously we're hoping it doesn't. The Iraqi security forces have said that one of their top priorities is to protect families inside of Mosul, to protect them in their homes, and make sure that they're able to stay rather than flee. That's what we're hoping. But if that doesn't happen, and if the families leave, we could be looking at the single largest, most complex humanitarian crisis in the world in 2016. If 1 million people flee, it could be a catastrophe.
And when you describe this worst-case scenario, exactly what are you referring to? A possibility for a chemical attack, a drawn-out battle?
We can't rule out a chemical attack, and it could be that Mosul ends up being under siege for months. Anytime a city is under siege, people are deprived of food, they're deprived of water, they don't have any of the things that they need in order to survive. If that's what happens in Mosul, it's going to be really tough.
You know, there is so much at stake here, and this is, as you said, this is tough. It's a major, a very complicated humanitarian effort. Does the UN have enough resources, and critically, does it have enough funding to step in and assist here?
The humanitarians that work in Iraq have been planning for Mosul since February. We've had contingency plans in place for months, and very early on we appealed to the international donors, asking them for funding so that we could make sure that stocks were pre-positioned and that emergency camps and sites were built. Donors have been generous, but we don't have nowhere near the funding that we require. So as we go into the Mosul operation right now, there are only emergency sites for 60,000 people. Right as we speak, we're rushing around the clock to build more emergency sites. We're anticipating, not even in a worst-case scenario, but in our working scenario, that between 200 to 400,000 people may flee. So we've got a lot of construction that has to happen right now.
Yeah, and the battle has only just started, but what is the need for basic aid right now for the people of Mosul? How dire is the situation for people there in terms of food, fuel, basic supplies?
As people come out from Mosul, if they flee, if they come outside of the city and across the front lines, and they make it to the emergency sites, we're going to be doing everything we can to support them, providing them with tents, providing them with water and sanitation, with food, with emergency household kits. There'll be a whole range of services that we'll be making sure they get. If the families are stuck inside of Mosul, there's nothing we can do to help them. The Iraqi security forces have said they're going to protect them, and we're hoping that's what happens.